Hey everyone, thanks for coming to my talk today. Super exciting to see you all here. How's Red Hat Summit / Ansible Fest going for all of you right now? Having fun? Awesome. So this is an exciting time for us at Ansible because we have a lot of cool things, as you've seen today, that we're talking about today. But to take that step back a little bit, and I'm happy that you all are here because we can kind of talk about how the things that we've talked about today with regards to event-driven Ansible and Lightspeed and how the ecosystem that is Ansible altogether kind of fits into a hybrid cloud strategy. So again, thank you so much for being here today. I know I'm competing with the EDA talk at the moment. An individual on my team within product management over there right now telling a good story that is event-driven Ansible. But what I'll do from our perspective here, again, is to talk through in a hybrid cloud situation, and I'm not going to go down into what hybrid cloud is because I understand you all get it. I'm not going to go and preach to you on that bit. But what I will do from an ex-operator standpoint is talk about how these tools fit together and what that step back that you could take is in identifying how you operate in a hybrid cloud and some suggestions and thought leadership on how Ansible can help with that and how all of our tools work together in tandem and all the components make up the Ansible Automation Platform and help you with that today. So, without further ado, a little bit of statistics to go into of what is the current landscape of things. We know that roughly 23% of people right now are telling us that, it's easy. Hybrid clouds, no big deal. We got it. We don't need to hear it from you. Really, realistically, though, it isn't easy, right? We have different ways of operating in our data centers. The clouds have their own ways of doing things. And when you try to make the applications fit into that square peg that is the cloud, you immediately find out that, hey, the things that we did in the data center doesn't really jive with how they operate in the cloud. And then when you start throwing in other complexities, it gets even more difficult. More tools come along with that, and things just get more and more difficult, right? Then we start talking about why do you want to do multi-cloud automation? Well, you want to get to the cloud faster. You want to deploy quicker. The whole point of the cloud is for us to spin up things right away. You're good to go, and then when you're done with it, it goes away. In the traditional data centers, it wasn't always that easy, right? We tried our best with the traditional hyper-virtualization tools to get us where we needed, but it was fairly static. You had systems that you had to deploy. Those systems took time to get into the racks. Cloud was always good for us there to spin up and get ready faster, deploy the app, walk away. Again, we, at least from my perspective, back in the early 2000s when we started with cloud, it was very manual, right? And in 2012, when I think back to it for myself, Ansible was in its infancy. And me as an operator, we really tried our best to think, okay, this is how we did it in our data center. Now that we have AWS as our cloud specifically for us, how could we apply what we did in the data center to what we did in the cloud? And we took our steps to figure out how we did that at an individual case-by-case basis for the cloud. But we started to quickly realize that we didn't want to take an all-encompassing approach to it, that they were unique in their own way, but we identified very quickly that there were certain commonalities that we could build into our automation that allowed us to get to where we needed to go with regards to deploying our applications in the cloud as quickly as we could. So now fast forward to the current day and age, we got these things called containers now. We all know that when containers first came out, we tried to treat them like virtual machines, right? Not really the way that they're meant to be used. I remember when we first started looking at containers, we We tried to treat them as a way to get an operating system onto a host that normally wouldn't have that operating system. So that was the way for the container to work. I didn't jive with that personally, but what we started to find was that the complexities that containers brought along with this and the transformation that we had to take for ourselves of how we manage those things was a lot more scalable than what we had anticipated. So we took that step back and recognized for ourselves we weren't ready for it yet. But now today, we see more people really empowered to get containers out there. We understand more what containers are doing. And that's just one more piece of complexity that's been added to a hybrid cloud approach, right? We all know Red Hat OpenShift. That is the value that we bring as Red Hat to help manage that container native solutions that you may provide. The cool thing for us from an Ansible perspective, and what I'm here to talk about today, is how do we stitch all of that together for you? We want to really help transition to that true hybrid model of infrastructure automation. We help change those processes and those ways to adapt, help you change, and help you grow. We really want you to be empowered to take that step back and identify what is legacy, whatever that means to you, right? What processes help you move to that next stage within the cloud, and then also further give you the opportunity to really operate in a hybrid cloud approach as you see fit to yourselves. Because I'm not going to be one to tell you ever that this is the way that hybrid cloud is and that is the definition. It doesn't work like that. I'm with all of you on that it works for what makes sense to you the most. But what I can tell you from experience is that when you take that step back and think about a framework like what we provide through Ansible, is how you can work with within your organization to understand where those barriers can be broken down and what you can do to solve those. So going back to my example, when we first started to build our data center in, was it 2013, we had an existing co-location that we operated in. It was pretty much a mess. So we identified, what did we want our servers to look like? What did we want them to be once they were plugged into the network, and how the application would get to them? So what I tell to most people right now is to take that step back and think about, okay, first step is to get the OS installed. Next step from there, build a baseline that is common across all versions of a system that you could deploy to. That baseline operating system, if you build it the right way, it doesn't matter where the OS lives. It's baseline enough for you to think, okay, this RHEL system is potentially the same as the RHEL system it could be in the cloud. So now you've established your baseline. That's your infrastructure automation, we'll call it that at the moment. Then you start to think about, how do I peel apart this onion of what the application is supposed to look like? That's where roles come into play with Ansible, and I strongly suggest looking into those, because that lets you take that step back and really think about, okay, so this application server is a Glassfish server. I have the ears living in this location in an Artifactory repository. This is where they're going to pull from. These are all the stages of where these things are going to be and how that pretty little puzzle comes together to make up that application. Well, again, same operating system stack across the board in my infrastructure, but that application in AWS, that's going to be a MongoDB-backed system that has Kafka and throw all of the things in here that makes it super complex. But those roles allow me to stitch all of those things together and think of what my landscape looks like. I'm walking more towards hybrid automation at that point, right? It's still traditional in the sense, from my perspective, of how I operate and how I integrate with my teams. but I'm really thinking about what is the solution that I'm trying to get to, and how do I utilize the strengths of those clouds that I am working in, and the tools that come along with them, and how do I use Ansible to automate all of that together. So really it's taking that step back and thinking, again, how is Ansible the glue of all of it? What does Ansible provide me as a means of a framework, as a glue to stitch all of this together? So then, to throw more complexity into this, we introduced Ansible Automation Platform. So back in my day, when I was an operator, it was still Tower. Tower was actually pretty brand new at the time. The idea for Tower was for all of us to have that central location to work out of. The idea behind Ansible Automation Platform, now as what it is today, is to provide more components in a true platform sense to help your teams increase their velocity to deploying their applications, managing the networks, whatever it is that you're automating with whatever tools that exist in your ecosystem to help you automating them. It gives you the ability to work as a unified team with a single cohesive language and framework to produce the output of what that automation is meant to do. One thing I always like to say about Ansible is, again, it's not the one, to use the Lord of the Rings approach of this, it's not truly the one ring to rule them all in the sense of it has to do it. It is the one ring to bind them. It is the way for you to say, you know what, hey, I've got this cool tool called Terraform. I love what it does for infrastructure automation. Awesome. We're happy you love that. But there are other things that have to take into place with regards to infrastructure automation, right? There's nothing saying that Ansible can't help you orchestrate Terraform and then Terraform to call Ansible or whatever else comes in that stack after that. That's really what we're trying to talk about here as how we suggest you do hybrid cloud automation. So, Ansible, for those of you that know, let me do a quick show of hands to get you more active in here. Who here uses Ansible today? So I'm not preaching to the choir. Okay, cool. So you all know, Ansible doesn't necessarily come with content out of the box, right? Most of that's built by all of yourselves. Well, what we're trying to do at Ansible Automation Platform and through our product subscription is to provide some suggestions out of the box on how to operate in your cloud. So with Ansible Cloud Automation and the content that we provide, we work with our partners, like the clouds, and also produce validated automation ourselves to help you get to automating quicker within those environments. So that's one thing that you'll see delivered through Automation Hub and console.redhat.com. Also with future updates of Ansible Automation Platform as you install it, it comes with that as well. So that's where all of this content comes to play. The idea here is to help you all stitch together what that automation could look like as sort of a guidance. But not necessarily does it have to be you must do it this way, and this is the only way it must be done. Because again, it's really up to how you all want to do it. But what we want to do is give you the assurance through this cloud automation that, hey, you're on the right path, that you've got content to work with. So if you do happen to go into a new cloud, let's say you're an Azure shop just by default, but you want to migrate into AWS as well. You got something to kickstart you off onto going into that realm. Let's say that you're going to be going into OpenShift. Obviously, with Red Hat, we all work together. We want to build solutions for you that help you get your applications into OpenShift and deploy quicker. Our goal with this content is to help enable you that. The cool thing with Lightspeed and the whole idea behind all of that is this content is utilized as a part of those models to build what automation comes to. We truly believe in a community. The idea is that community is backed by content that our partners provide, as well as the open community provides as well. So you are not alone in that world. So as you all know, there are many use cases that come along with Ansible. There are use cases that we have to touch within regards to managing a hybrid cloud solution. So orchestration, that's number one I always hit the head on when it comes to Ansible and talking about it. I've already talked about that a little bit today. We also talk about operationalizing your processes. And then finally, we talk about how you govern that as well within your teams. I like to think of it as kind of this never-ending circle, if you will, of how things get from infrastructure provisioning all the way into production and then the loop back that comes with that. When I designed my systems and my architecture, I really wanted to provide everyone the means throughout the organization to provision hosts wherever they were. It could have even been on their local systems, right? It didn't matter, because true hybrid to me meant I have an app, I have a place I want it to go. Doesn't matter where that thing goes, I just want that app to be a thing, right? I wanted to produce a system in the true machinery sense of the word to allow people to provision that application and wait for it to get ready to go, and they could do whatever testing they were doing, or if it was going into production. I wanted to give them that opportunity to hit a button, sit back, and play a video game or do whatever it else is that they needed to do at that point in time to kill the time. I always say that I am going to be successful as a product manager here at Ansible if I enable every IT operator the ability to go play at an arcade whilst they're waiting for their applications to deploy. Because that's, we always say at Ansible, we want to empower you to be innovative and to take that step away from the mundane tasks that is operations. We all know that sucks. It's the life of being an IT operator. But I take it one step further, is it's not just me as an ops person. My devs have their own problems they have to solve as well. They'd rather be writing code for that next new feature, right? My network engineers, they don't want to hear a phone call from the NOC again saying, hey, this switch is down again. What's going on there? Like, they don't want to hear that. They want to build more infrastructure. So these tools, our framework, and all the tools in there have a way to work with each other. And we want to stitch that all together and create that feedback loop of operationalization, right? So as we take this step forward in identifying what public and private cloud automation could look like, we want to start thinking about how you establish within yourselves what you're trying to accomplish. I challenge you to take that stance, that Ansible could be that framework to help you to manage your infrastructure, to manage those other tools within your organization, to help make that complexity a little bit less of a thing that it is to swallow. Take that step back with yourselves to truly think about what it is that you're trying to accomplish, what that application is that you want to deploy, whatever processes that you're trying to collapse as a team and work together on accomplishing. It really is meant to be that common language, again, that glue, to help you make these clouds or VMware or whatever virtualization layer you have in your local data center as similar as you can be, because it's all just an operating system, right? We all have typical applications that we all deploy. All of our stuff is going to be unique. We have different requirements at each location. We're not saying that that isn't the case anymore, but what we are saying is that processes are processes. You can define them in some way, and you really could take that step back and say, hey, me as an individual, I do steps 1, 2, and 3 to make a thing be what it's going to be, why can't I make those steps be tasks in an automation playbook? That's the kind of approach that I suggest taking. So again, using the platform, once you got the content created, you got that content to go somewhere to run. And that's where the platform comes into play. So using Lightspeed, you've created your content. For those individuals that aren't really jiving with what a playbook can do, or they need a little bit of help, or are just lazy like me and would rather speak the open word and say what I want my playbook to look like and give me a suggestion. Once it's in there, then you can start scheduling your tasks. And those tasks in the playbook will start doing their thing, right? They'll keep your systems the way you expect them. It'll call out to the other systems to make sure that those applications could deploy. All is Gucci. And then EDA comes into play, and this is where I have a lot of fun with it. EDA then helps operationalize it. It glues it together and says, well, you know, that ping failure that did come in from the host, let's run a ping check on it. Okay, ping check goes good. What's next? Well, let's see if the service endpoint is alive. That's the next step in the rulebook. Checks that the service endpoint is not alive. So then we tell that rulebook, next step, go to that host, run this playbook on it, kick the service. It kicks the service, it comes back online, rulebook checks again, comes back green, and then it closes out the issue. All of that's captured, all using EDA, calling out to the controller to do that playbook that already exists in there. That's that full feedback loop that we're talking about here. Ansible Automation Platform becomes that glue because of all those components working together in tandem, identifying what automation exists and how you operationalize it, no matter where it lives. So we aren't kidding when we're saying it works with practically everything. It really does. Does it out of the box? You all know, a lot of cases it doesn't. But the cool thing about Ansible is it allows you to take those tools that may have API endpoints or some way to communicate with them and write a plugin to communicate with them and do a thing. That's the cool thing about EDA. We took that same approach and said, you know what? These monitoring solutions have an alert that it can send out. We're going to create a plugin called a source plugin on how to ingest that information. And then we're going to use Ansible Rulebook, that's the back-end system that actually kicks off that rulebook, to go off and tell the rules to do its thing, and then it's going to integrate with Ansible Playbook to then do that automation. We're keeping that glue approach together. It's all those plugins working with all of these things you see here, and their various tools and the ways they do their thing, and making them a part of a larger system. So to talk a little bit about customers that have done this, because I'm not going to just preach about myself and what I've done, you know, what is it now, 10 plus years ago. Let's talk about some other customers that have used Ansible Automation Platform. So this customer here was working on Microsoft Azure. They wanted to do a little bit similar to what I tried to do back at my last job with turning off environments on the weekends. I'll say to you, we never got to that just because people did it a little bit differently. But this is a cool approach, right? This helps save a lot of money because we all know cloud spend is not cheap. So they use Ansible to help them on a schedule, no matter what, kill those systems. It's the weekend. We're not working. Help them remove systems that weren't being utilized anymore. It's all things that we all know and love that we have to do for keeping our infrastructure managed, right? They were able to use Ansible to help them get rid of that task that they have to do. So that was pretty cool that they could reduce that amount of spend. Another customer had new deployment processes that they had to follow and new development processes that they had to implement. they used Ansible to build that common language with themselves on how they deploy their applications. So similar to what I was talking about. Really, it's not rocket science, but they themselves really transformed the way that they worked across their teams and used Ansible as that common language to break down those barriers and work with each other. So my success story myself is a little similar to this. When I first joined my last location, it took us roughly 2 weeks to get 2 servers live. Once we started using Ansible, we got it down to a single hour because we broke that complexity much, down to the bare minimum of what we needed. Similar approach to them. It's really, they took that time to identify where are our strengths as a team, how do we translate that to deployment, and how does it fit into the infrastructure that we're working with here. This customer, very similar to mine, they needed to, if I recall correctly, their migration was a matter of timing. They had this last-minute ditch effort of when they had to migrate to the cloud, and they had to migrate most of their workloads off into that cloud. We all know when that time comes, our leadership says, hey, pull the trigger, let's go. Cloud's the way. The nice thing about having Ansible as a way to back that, you at least know roughly what your automation is going to do and where it's going to land. So it gives you the ability to migrate rather easily. So taking a step back and talking about what Ansible can do, let's say, theoretically, you all here didn't know where you could put it with regards to managing the application stack that is AAP. We have plenty of hosting options now available to it, so if you yourselves don't have a location within your local data center that you want to deploy to, we also have cloud offerings that we provide to you as customers now for your subscription as well. The cool thing about these cloud offerings is you can actually use your committed cloud spend for those as well. So if for whatever reason you weren't able to use AAP because of cost, that at least is an option now too. Talking a little bit about some further, the Azure specific one is pretty cool. We manage it, the application, we keep it alive, we make sure that it works for you, yada, 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 but it's in your accounts within Azure. So that's an option if you don't want to maintain it yourselves. And then in Google Cloud and AWS, those are just like any other marketplace solution. You can download it, it'll get installed onto your appropriate instances, you manage it yourselves, but at least we provide you the package in a easy to consume manner from a cloud solution standpoint. So there's that bit. And then finally, you can go the traditional route that we provide. Just have it run in the cloud. You can get the package from us at Red Hat through our subscription manager, download it and install it. And it works towards your spend agreements again, but it's there for you to utilize with all 3 of the clouds. So I want to keep this quick and simple for you. I don't want to bore you with much else. I want to leave it open for questions for a little bit. But real quickly, we have a lot more resources available to you all for understanding what public cloud automation is, a little bit of the technical side of it, and then what container native automation is, as well as private cloud automation. And then finally, we have a bunch more learning resources as well for those of you that want to help get more people within your organization to using Ansible. These are links that are provided that you'll be able to get to after the show and work with Ansible more. And with that, I'm not going to bore you anymore with my stuff, but I'd love to get questions from you all for about 15 more minutes, and then we can call it early. Yes. So the question was, can Ansible Automation Platform be a potential use case for STIG remediation or compliance adherence? Is that a good way to sum it up? Yes, and there are other solutions that are provided by Red Hat as well to accomplish that as well. So Red Hat Insights is one means to keeping in compliance. The beauty of Ansible, it allows you to run, let's use STIG as an example, constantly against those hosts to keep them within compliance. It isn't desired state in the truest sense of like a puppet approach or a chef approach where it makes it be the way you want it to be, but it enforces it in a way of assuming that the thing is already there that you want it to be there. Does that make sense? So let's say a file by the name of varlog thing exists. If it's not there, it will create it. But if it is there, it will check to make sure it's there and say, okay, go ahead and move along. So from a STIG compliance standpoint, it can ensure that the things that are meant to be stay in that consistent state and will constantly run against it. So yes, 100% definitely a way to go there. Yes, sir.
Network diagram, I saw you had an arrow to the change management system.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't see is an arrow to a SIM system. Do you have interfaces to develop and support those kinds of things?
I believe it was, I'm not even going to try and find it anymore. Yeah. Yep. So out of the box, we don't have those yet, but that doesn't mean that they can't be done. So from a Splunk perspective, more specifically, there are means to take the logs that are in Ansible Automation Platform and pipe them to Splunk, just like you could do with anything in a Splunk folder. So we have consistent place that those logs go into. And then you could theoretically create a Splunk app to watch those logs and then feed back an alert to EDA and say, hey, something happened within the AAP infrastructure. So like, let's say you're monitoring the health of AAP. You could say, this thing happened. Maybe let's just say a job failed as a random example. Job failed. It caught that alert. Kick off the job again at a very simple approach. That's one thing you could do from it. Same thing goes for another application within your infrastructure. Let's say that you have something like Dynatrace, like we talked about today, or App Dynamics, or any other APM solution. You could have memory utilization tracking, firing off alert to EDA, and then EDA will know what to do based on the rulebook, stuff like that. It's a lot of cool things that you can actually do with EDA and the platform and remediating issues that come through. And it just doesn't matter where those things live because it's just using the inventory of the hosts that you're already automating against. Yes, sir. So I'm not sure of the Watson X thing that you're talking about. Potentially, yeah. So how Lightspeed leverages Watson Code Assistant is it's building that model of here's all of the content that exists. So let's say for Meraki's example, content exists for that already. It could look at that content and say, here's what content looks like with regards to what Meraki is being automated for. Here are some examples back to you of how to create a switch or how to create an access point or whatever. It provides that suggestion to you, and then you can fill in what is specific to your location and then commit that to your source repository and to move forward on automating your Meraki devices. I hope that answers your question.
This is, I think, a broader-based generative AI platform.
Okay. Yeah, so my understanding of Code Assistant is it's a subsection of that specifically. Yes?
So in the session description, there was something about migrating workloads from vSphere to OpenShift. Where does Ansible come into play?
So the cool thing about migrating workloads is, let's say that your application stack is in vSphere, but then you're now ready to move to a container native solution, and you have containers of your applications. What you can do theoretically in one case is you could do kind of an A/B deployment. You could say, hey, all of the things that are in vSphere, let's shut them down now, deploy the application as it's meant to be in OpenShift right now, using Ansible to help orchestrate that flow, and then turn it back on. As you know, this is where the new flow of traffic is going to come in from. That's one way you could do it. It's really, again, taking that step back and saying, what are we trying to accomplish, and how would we manually do it? Use a tool like Ansible to help orchestrate that all together. So it may not be seamless. It's not always easy to do that, right? But if you have the means to do that with your application where it's true active-active, then you could totally do that. It's just, you know, how does it fit for you? Because there isn't one size all. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it. I saw a hand up over here, I think. No? Yes? Yeah. So I myself haven't operated with Argo CD, so I couldn't tell you. But I will always err on the side of, yeah, it totally can. There is no reason why one has to exist over the other. I will never take that stance. As far as any continuous delivery tool is concerned, I just, again, figure out where you as an operator or your processes ask you to take a step into doing something. Take that step back and say, hey, can Ansible do it on my behalf instead? It's really just remove yourself as that manual check as much as you possibly could. Yes?
You should benefit of orchestrate Terraform with Ansible if I have a Terraform enterprise solution.
Yeah. So Terraform is a really cool tool because it really does truly understand the state of your cloud, right? What Terraform doesn't do directly out of the box if you aren't fully into building your full cloud in the hashy way is what happens after that cloud is provisioned. So, wow, it was like 3 years ago, 4 years ago now. I actually was at HashiConf and we did a joint talk on how do Terraform and Ansible work well together. It's actually still on YouTube. A lot of it still applies today. Essentially what we agree is that Terraform can call Ansible, that can call Terraform again, that can call Terraform, you know, it's a circular love that we have with each other of how our tools work together in accomplishing what we're there to accomplish. One doesn't have to replace the other. You've heard me say that a number of times today. And there are things that Terraform does from their enterprise solution that is really, really cool. And I would totally tell people, yeah, go for it. There's a way to integrate it and just continue to work with the two. Yes, sir.
We have environments that are connected, some are sporadically connected, some sporadically disconnected. How would you approach that for managing that?
So the cool thing about Ansible Automation Platform is we have a concept of automation mesh, you may or may not have heard of. Automation mesh allows, in an edge-like environment where you have disconnected systems in their own data center that's not connected to the greater whole, you can place a control node or an execution node, as we call them, in that data center. And you can say, hey, these hosts are managed by this execution node. Keep doing automation against them. And then when a pipe opens up between the two, like let's just say theoretically you've got an oil rig or a ship out in the middle of the Pacific that hasn't phoned back home yet. It can still automate those things, and then when it connects back up, all of that data goes back to that controller node and says, here's all the jobs that ran, and this is the current state of the things. So that is one value add to automation mesh with Ansible Automation Platform that's outside of just the normal Ansible command line tool. Yep, because all of the content through those execution environments where the content lives on those control nodes themselves or those execution nodes. And they do all of that automation through that content that's already there. Any other questions, folks? All right, cool. Well, yes.
What age was Ansible forged in Middle Earth, and who caused you to fall into shadow of the planet?
I don't know that date. But I like that. That was good. Cool. Well, with that, I'm gonna call it early, folks. I didn't want to really bore you all with more mundane thought leadership, but if any of you have any more questions, I'll be here for a few minutes more. Thank you again for attending, and enjoy the rest of Summit and Fest.